All right, so we're back with Proclus's commentary on the Timaeus, translated by Thomas Taylor. And we were actually right at the end of book one before we ended last time, which was about a month ago. There was a in real life event that took up a couple weekends, and then I needed extra time to prep for that as it was approaching. But now we're ready to get back into this. Hopefully, we can remember most of the lines of thought. We had just looked at why the three dialogues, the Republic, the Timaeus, and the Critias, are in the order that they are, and then also what the topic of the lost Hermocrates, or like unwritten Hermocrates, not clear, would have been. And that would have been the speech. So Proclus seemed to think that when Zeus cuts off and the Critias ends, Zeus is about to, of course, say how the Atlanteans ought to be punished. And apparently the Hermocrates should have been Zeus's speech. And I guess some more things related to speech. He says basically like Timaeus creates the men, Critias like gives them their proper order, and then Hermocrates would have like or set them in action, and then Hermocrates would have like put the words in their mouths. So it's just relating why these dialogues are presented in the order they are. I don't have to rehearse those arguments. We're going to be moving on to new stuff. So at the beginning of book two, we'll begin with I think a summary of the first book, or the introduction generally, but we'll see when we get to that. So now we should have finished this last time. I didn't see that we were like that close to the end. But anyway, we have this little bit to get through. Socrates, I seem to behold a perfect and splendid banquet of discussion set before me. It belongs, therefore, now to you, O Timaeus, to begin the discourse, having, first of all, as is fit, invoked the gods according to law. So we're just about to begin Timaeus's, like the main part of the dialogue, which will be exciting. Proclus. And I think I need to start pronouncing it Proclus. I've had mixed feelings about that pronunciation, because it's like if you're going to pronounce Proclus, shouldn't you pronounce like Socrates, Socrates, and, Plato, Plato? It's either anglicize them all or, Hellenize them all. But anyway, I'll try to maybe go for Proclus. All right. The perfection and the splendor of the narration indicate the supernatural production of things on account of their paradigms, and which takes place universally. And to these the words of Socrates refer. Okay. The banquet of discussion indicates the perfect plenitude of demiurgic forms. But the calling on Timaeus, the conversion of partial causes to the whole, and an evocation of the goods thence derived. Okay. Arguably, we can see Timaeus standing for the demiurge, the banquet of discussion before him. Of course, when he talks about the banquet of discussion there in the context of the dialogue, he's talking about all that he has to look forward to, not just Timaeus's speech. And it seems like the plenitude of demiurgic forms would be more pertinent to what Timaeus has on offer. But all right. Calling on Timaeus, conversion back to the demiurge, makes sense. And the invocation of the gods, the fabrication supernally suspended from intelligibles. All right. For the expression, according to law, is not such as many of the italic or Attic interpreters suppose it to be, but it has the same meaning as the words usually employed by the Pythagoreans. Quote, honor in the first place the immortal gods, as they are disposed by law. For law manifests the divine order, according to which secondary are always suspended from prior causes, and are filled from them. Okay, so the difference seems to be maybe these other interpreters assumed that it is lawful to invoke the gods as you go forward, But here, the Pythagorean interpretation is more honor the gods insofar as and how according to the manner in which they are disposed by law. For law, here Proclus, for law manifests the divine order, according to which secondary are always suspended from prior causes and are filled from them. But law, thus beginning from intelligibles, extends to the demiurgic cause, and from this proceeds, and is divided about the universe. So it's through that law. It's not simply that, okay, it's lawful that you should invoke the name of the gods, or invoke the gods before you begin a great undertaking, which Socrates will also do on many occasions. But it's rather that the dissemination of law is kind of the same as that, like, diffusion of divine energies. At the same time, however, Socrates indicates through these things that the Pythagorean doctrine requires that physiology should commence from a divine cause, and that it should not be such as that which he reprobates in the Phaedo, which blinds the eye of the soul by assigning airs and ethers as causes, conformably to Anaxagoras. For it is necessary that true physiology should be suspended from theology, in the same manner as nature is suspended from the gods, and is divided according to the total orders of them, so that words may be imitators of the things of which they are significant. For mythologists also narrate that Hephaestus, who presides over nature, was in love with Athena, who weaves the order of intellectual forms, and is the supplier of intelligence to all mundane essences. As far as to this, therefore, the preface of the Timaeus receives its completion, of which Severus, indeed, did not think fit to give any interpretation. But Longinus does not say that the whole is superfluous, but only such particulars as are introduced about the Atlantics and the narration of the Egyptians, so that he is accustomed to conjoin with the request of Socrates the promise of Critias. I mean, he connects with the words, quote, I now therefore stand prepared to receive the promised feast, the words, quote, but now consider, Socrates, the manner of our disposing the mutual banquet of discussion. Okay, so Longinus was the one that was interpreting more things seemingly rhetorically, and so he thought the Atlantic narrative was just to sort of grab people's interest. But Porphyry and Iamblichus show that this preface accords with the whole design of the dialogue. The one, indeed, more partially, Porphyry, but the other with more profound intuition, Iamblichus, so that we also shall here finish the book in conformity to Plato, having adopted their order. Okay. Great. So, we're moving on to book 2. Just 1 second. Okay, book 2. The preface of the Timaeus consists of 2 heads, and this is Proclus, not Thomas Taylor, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is Proclus. The preface of the Timaeus consists of 2 heads, a recapitulation of the polity of Socrates, and a concise narration of the war of the Athenians against the Atlantics, and the victory which they obtained over them. Each of these, however, contributes in the greatest degree to the consummation of the whole theory of the world, for the form of the Socratic polity, considered by itself, is primarily adapted to the orderly distribution of the heavens. But the narration of the war and the victory becomes a symbol to us of mundane contrariety. And the former describes in images the first fabrication, but the latter the second. So the first fabrication is, I think, the celestial. Second fabrication is the sublunar. But the Socratic polity, then, is an image of the first fabrication, because we're dealing with the order of the heavens. That's So the Socratic constitution is in the image of the heavens. I think we have that in the Republic too. But definitely in Timaeus, or at least the Proclus commentary on the Timaeus. It's hard to keep it all straight, and it has been a little while since we looked at this. And the war is the image of the kind of mundane sublunar contraries. Or, if you are willing, the former describes the formal, but the latter the material cause. For all physiologists make principles to be contraries, and constitute the world from the harmonious conjunction of contraries. And harmony indeed, and order are derived from form, which in the recapitulation is shown to proceed from the polity in common, and to extend in an orderly progression to every multitude. For it is one thing to deliver the polity which is in the soul, another that which is in men, and another that which is mundane. But the recapitulation of Socrates describing the form itself of every polity separately exhibits to us primarily the polity in the universe, to which also it entirely hastens to refer, the polities that rank as parts. So all of this is just repeating points that were made in the first book. Farther still, if also you are willing to consider the affair after another manner, the polity may be arranged as analogous to the heavens, but the war to generation. And we were just looking at this, or maybe not just looking at this, but we had looked at this in Thomas Taylor's dissertation on Aristotle's philosophy, where the use of the term generation is like there's a strictly speaking sense of generation that is the sublunar world, and then there's the wider sense of generation, which is all corporeal things, including celestial corporeal bodies. Aristotle seems only to use generation of the sublunar. Plato sometimes uses generation of just the entire corporeal order, even if it wasn't generated in time and can't actually be destroyed. I think we already saw that. I'm trying to keep my sources straight. I'm not sure if we saw that. We will, I'm sure. Proclus addressing this point where in the Timaeus text, it seems that the world could be dissolved, but never will, because the will of the demiurge will always maintain it. But that's kind of the same as to say that because of the nature of its suspending cause, it is really impossible that it should ever be destroyed, because the nature of the suspending cause will always remain the same. So in that sense, then, it is like of the nature of generation, but it was never created at a particular point in time, and it will never be destroyed, and yet we can still call it generation because it's suspended from soul in the same way that sublunar generated things that come into being and are destroyed are suspended. So there's the world of generation in the wider sense, and then the world of generation in the stricter sense, the sense in which Aristotle seemingly always takes it, which is the sublunar world. And here it looks like we're dealing with generation in the stricter sense. Okay. For the polity extends as far as to the last of things, since all things are arranged conformably to the series which proceeds from the demiurge as far as to mundane natures. Contrariety also pre-exists after a manner in the heavens, either according to the twofold circulations of the celestial bodies, viz. To the right hand and to the left, circle the same and the different, no, that's different than, he's going to list that next. So wouldn't that be the same? Like the planets, do they move always contrary to the motion, but of the fixed stars? Not sure. Or according to the twofold circles of souls, the circle of sameness and the circle of difference. Okay. So I think the planets must move opposite to the general tendency of the fixed stars, and that's why the circle of the same and the circle of different, like the different, I think described in the Republic as well, rotate in different directions. But okay, at least the circulation of souls sameness and difference, the composition of the world soul, we still have two kind of contrary circles. Or according to the genre of being, permanency, and motion. So even that will, all of these levels will apply even to the celestial bodies, even if another kind of war of generation doesn't apply, but permanency and motion. Or according to the divine peculiarities, the male and the female, or according to any other such like division. The polity, therefore, is more allied to the heavens, but the war to generation. Hence, the former is Zeusian, but the latter pertains to the allotment of Poseidon. After, however, the theory of parts, it is necessary through images to be extended to the knowledge of wholes, and after the survey of images themselves, it is requisite to adhere to their paradigms, from small being initiated in greater objects of contemplation. Okay. For the former, have the relation of things preparatory to initiation and of small mysteries. That is, these images, I think both the celestial and realm of generation are images of higher things that we're going to be referred to. So after looking at these images, we have to look to their paradigms. So the smaller mysteries are like the composition of the universe. The greater mysteries are what that they point you to, I believe. For the former have the relation of things preparatory to initiation and of small mysteries, exciting the eye of the soul to the comprehension of the whole and the universe, and to the contemplation of the one cause and the one progression of all mundane natures. For everything is from the one, and the universe will having in different parts of it more partial presiding powers. I think I read that wrong. For everything is from the one, and the universe, with having in different parts of it more partial presiding powers, proceeds vice versa to the one cause of its subsistence. Okay. Nothing new there. Everything proceeds from the one and then reverts back to its one cause. Timaeus, however, prior to entering on the whole discussion, converts himself to the invocations of and prayers to the gods, imitating in this the maker of the universe, who, prior to the whole fabrication of things, is said to have approached to the oracle of night, to have been there filled with divine intellectual conceptions, to have received the principles of fabrication, and there to dissolve, if it be lawful so to speak, all his doubts. The oracle of night. So night being one of these gods in the intelligible realm that's, superior to demiurge. The demiurge is at the very bottom of the second hypostasis. And I don't know where this reversion of the demiurge back is described. I know it's a similar dynamic is described in Proclus on the Cratylus, but independent of Proclus, where is this discussed? Maybe it's in the Chaldean oracles or Orphic hymns, not sure. Okay. Tonight also, who calls on the father, Zeus, to engage in the fabrication of the universe, Zeus is represented by the theologist as saying, so the theologist will be, I guess, Orpheus. Yeah, Immortal Night. We could look up I have a column. I could find out right now, disambiguate this, because I happen to have Proclus on the Cratylus here, and there's a chart at the end of it written by the translator. Yeah, so Immortal Night will be the three nights. Yeah, that's Orphic language. And we have that as the first triad of the intelligible and intellectual order. Okay. So that's like the first third of the life phase, the second phase of the second hypostasis generally. So that's what the demiurge reverts back to according to the Orphic hymns. So Zeus is represented by the theologist as saying, Maya, supreme of all the powers divine, immortal night, how with unconquered mind must I the source of the immortals fix? And he receives this answer from her. All things receive enclosed on every side in ether's wide ineffable embrace, then in the midst of ether place the heaven. And he is instructed by her in all the consequent fabrication of the world. But again, to Cronus, after the bonds, Zeus, all but praying, says, Daimon, most famed, our progeny direct. Okay, so anyway, important to note that Night, immortal Night, continues to consult the Demiurge, and that's the first third of the second phase of the second hypostasis. So I guess bear that in mind, but this has its progeny as a doctrine from Orphism. This is not Platonic, but according to Proclus, it's going to be well integrated if we do take this. So let's see. And in all that follows, he calls forth the benevolence of his father. So I assume Daimon most famed is termed analogously, to Zeus. Cronus is a daimon because, like, relative to humans, daimons are like the next level above. Well, Cronus is the next level above Zeus's order in his capacity as the demiurge of wholes. In all that follows, he calls forth the benevolence of his father. For how could he otherwise fill all things with gods and assimilate the sensible world to animal itself, or the intelligible paradigm, than by extending himself to the invisible causes of wholes, from which, being himself filled, quote, he from his sacred heart may godlike works again produce. Okay. So this doctrine that the demiurge reverts back upon all the intelligibles, like it's clear from the text of the Timaeus that the demiurge uses the archetype of the intelligible animal itself in the creation of the world. That's clear. But whether he gathers all of these together and consults Night as a particular level of these intelligibles, that seems like kind of just expanding out and mythologizing. But in any case, Proclus's idea is that the demiurge reverts back and then is guided by those higher intelligibles in how he produces the world. It is necessary, therefore, prior to all other things, that we should know something manifest concerning prayer, what its essence is, and what its perfection, and whence it is imparted to souls. Because prayer is here used, according, again, to the Orphic hymns, by the demiurge prior to his construction. So there's an analogy, Timaeus praying to the gods, while the demiurge, in effect, prays to gods higher than himself before endeavoring in his creative act. And of course, that's not a temporal before, that's like a prior kind of thing. Okay, what its essence is, what its perfection, and whence it is imparted to souls. Prayer. For the philosopher Porphyry, indeed, describing those among the ancients that admitted prayer, and those that did not, leads us from one opinion to another, and says, in short, that neither those who are diseased according to the first kind of impiety derive any benefit from prayer, since they do not admit that there are gods, nor those who labor under the second kind and entirely subvert providence, granting indeed that there are gods, but denying their providential energies. Those are the two things that Plato insists on persuading the citizens of, I forget which city they're founding in the laws. It has a name, but I forget. Anyway, but that the citizens of that city need to be persuaded that there are gods and that the gods act in the world for good. So, repeating that, Porphyry says prayer won't be efficacious for either of these two classes, atheists and effectively mechanistic deists, I guess, similar to the Founding Fathers. Nor are they benefited by it, prayer, who admit indeed the providence of the gods, but assert that all things are produced by them from necessity. So yes, the gods act, but if they act kind of by compulsion and there's no wiggle room in how their energies are assimilated to us, then they won't, according to their own hypothesis, receive a benefit because they can't change how the gods affect us. I think Proclus's solution will, of course, be that prayer affects the prayer. The gods benevolently, eternally emanate their providence, and it's how we are fitted to receive that providential energy that can change. So prayer does affect a change in us, not in the gods. I think that's he hasn't said this here yet, but I think that's Proclus's position. For there is no longer any advantage to be derived from prayer if things of a contingent nature have not any existence. If there's no such thing as contingency whatsoever. So that's a stronger statement. So here he says all things are produced by them, but from necessity. The gods produce from necessity. I think that can be true, but it doesn't. We don't have to go to the further extreme of saying that no contingent nature exists whatsoever and all things are necessitated. But such as assert that the gods providentially attend all things, and that many things that are generated are contingent and may subsist otherwise, these very properly admit the necessity of prayers and acknowledge that they correct our life. Porphyry also so all of this is Porphyry's position too. He has that idea of prayer already. Although he didn't spell out specifically what I said, Proclus eventually lands on. But at least this is the class of person who, according to their own hypotheses, prayer ought to benefit. The gods do providentially attend, they do exist, and some things in the world are contingent. Porphyry also adds that prayer especially pertains to worthy men because it is a contact with divinity. But the similar loves to be conjoined to the similar, and the worthy man is most similar to the gods. Alcinous, the Middle Platonist, says that the purpose of philosophy is to assimilate ourselves to the gods, to become like gods. Because likewise those who embrace virtue are in custody and are enclosed in the body as in a prison, they ought to request the gods that they may migrate from hence. Besides, since we are as children torn from our parents, it is fit we should pray that we may return to our true parents, the gods. Those also resemble such as are deprived of their fathers and mothers, who do not think it requisite to pray and be converted to the gods. So, people who don't think that prayer and conversion to the gods is necessary are like orphans. All nations likewise that have excelled in wisdom have diligently applied themselves to prayer. Among the Indians, the Brahmins; among the Persians, the Magi; and of the Greeks, the most theological, who instituted initiatory rites and mysteries. But the Chaldeans venerate every other divinity, and likewise the virtue itself of the gods, which they denominate a goddess. Okay, interesting. So the virtue of the gods is called by the Chaldeans a goddess. So far are they from despising sacred worship on account of the possession of virtue. So even it's not like just attaining virtue independently eliminates the need for prayer. Instead, the virtue, even of the gods, is itself a goddess. And so I guess we ought to have a prayerful attitude to the archetype of virtue itself if we're going to be successful in receiving those energies and becoming virtuous. And in addition to all this, as we are parts of the universe, it is fit that we should be in want of the universe. For a conversion to the whole imparts salvation to everything. If, therefore, you possess virtue, you should invoke that which antecedently comprehends all virtue. For that which is all good, which will also be the cause to you of appropriate good. Okay. So we are partial. We don't have everything in us. And our virtues will be the appropriate virtues, and our goods will be the appropriate goods, not all good, but still in reverting to the all good and the all virtuous, that gives us our appropriate virtue and goodness, even though we are partial. Or if you explore a certain corporeal good, there is a power in the world which comprehends all body. It is necessary, therefore, that perfection should from thence be derived to the parts. Perfection comes from the whole to the parts, even if we posit that goodness is something that's corporeally invested primarily, then we would still want to align ourselves with the general corporeity of the universe and get our appropriate good as a dispensation from the whole good. It is necessary, therefore, that perfection should be from thence, perfection should from thence be derived to the parts. And this is the sum of what is said by Porphyry on this subject. Okay. The divine Iamblichus, however, does not think that a history of this kind pertains to what is here proposed to be considered. For Plato is not now speaking about atheistical men, but about such as are wise and able to converse with the gods. Nor does he speak of such as are dubious about the works of piety, but to such as wish to be saved by those who are the saviors of wholes. He delivers the power of prayer and its admirable and supernatural perfection, which transcends all expectation. So Iamblichus probably in his not surviving commentary criticized Porphyry in his not surviving commentary, that Porphyry shouldn't have spent time discussing like what kind of people benefit from prayer, because we're already assuming goodly, godly men in the Timaeus. Seems like Iamblichus being disagreeable, but that's just how it is coming across to me now. All right. Let me move this screen share a little bit. It is fit, however, that transferring what he says to what is more usual and more known to the reader, we should render his meaning clear, and assign arguments concerning prayer which accord with the doctrine of Plato. From hence, therefore, we must begin. All beings are the progeny of the gods, by whom they are produced without a medium, and in whom they are firmly established. All things are produced without a medium by the gods, or all beings, rather. We should say all essences. The true ousias stop with souls. Nothing beneath the level of a soul is a real being in the sense of an essence. For the progression of things which perpetually subsist and cohere from permanent causes is not alone perfected by a certain continuation, but immediately subsists from the gods, the immortal part of us. Essences are necessary beings and never don't exist, and so essences, qua essences, are immortal, so gods produce all essences directly. From whence all things are generated, however distant they may be from the divinities. So all things are generated from the gods at some distance. The essences are produced with no mediation. And this is no less true, even though asserted of matter itself. For a divine nature is not absent from anything, but is equally present to all things. That's interesting that he says it's equally present. I guess, yeah, the gods are equally present to all things whatsoever, but not all things turn back towards the gods and are as receptive as they could be. So any failure to receive divine energies is a failure not of the agent, the god, but of the patient, the recipient. Hence, though you should assume the last of beings, in these also you will find divinity. For the one is everywhere, and in consequence of its absolute dominion, everything receives its nature and coherence from the gods. Okay. And I wonder, this is something probably that Plotinus wouldn't agree with, that even the last of beings you will find divinity. That would imply that matter isn't this kind of totally abject, ugly thing that Plotinus seems to treat it as. But now we're on Iamblichus's doctrine, so we're going to expect that to be more, like divinizing of the material world. Same reason Iamblichus ultimately says that we don't have an exempt part of the soul outside of the world, being totally descended. The way out is through kind of embodied theurgic practices, more ritualistic, in other words. So anyway, I guess the total descent of souls is kind of weirdly correlated with the divinization of immanent matter in Iamblichus. As all things, however, proceed, so likewise they are not separated from the gods, but radically abide in them as the causes and sustainers of their existence. So all things subsist in the gods, not separate from the gods. Which is funny, because that sort of sounds different from what I just said about souls descending totally. And Proclus repeats that in the Elements of Theology, that souls, when they descend entire, not leaving some like separate essential part of themselves. And that's a doctrine that I think is problematic, because how can an eternal essence undergo change in that way? Energies of souls change. The essence is not supposed to change because it's eternal. So how exactly does that work? Shouldn't the essence always be there, uncorrupted? But anyway, this statement here also seems not to jive well with the total descent of souls, because all things, we have it here, radically abide in the gods. For where can they recede, since the gods primarily comprehend all things in their embrace? Okay. Cool. So the world is like in God in that sense. It makes you think thoughts in the mind of God, or some kind of panentheism where the natural world is comprehended by divinity. Divinity encloses and permeates everything in the world, but also extends beyond it. For whatever is placed as separate from the gods has not any kind of subsistence. Because what grants subsistence is that oneness. The one has to be with all things, or a hened has to be with all things, or else they won't have existence, because there won't be any one thing that they are. But all beings are contained by the gods and reside in their natures, after the manner of a circular comprehension. Hence, by a wonderful mode of subsistence, all things proceed, and yet are not, nor indeed can be, separated from the gods. Because all offspring, when torn from their parents, immediately recur to the immense vastness of non-entity. So if we were separated from the gods, like newborn infants, we would just be wasted away. But in a certain respect, they are established in them, and in short, proceed in themselves, but abide in the gods. Since, however, having proceeded, it is requisite that they should be converted in return, imitating the evolution into light and conversion of the gods to their cause, in order that these, being arranged conformably to the perfective triad, may again be contained by the gods and the first unities. Hence they receive from them a certain secondary perfection, by which they may be able to convert themselves to the goodness of the divinities, in order that, being at first rooted in, they may again through conversion be established in them, forming a certain circle, which originates from and terminates in the gods. So there's kind of an initial creative providential act of the gods that grounds our existence, and then a turning of our soul, a grace, I guess, by which we become revertive and become fit to return or revert to our originating cause. All things, therefore, both abide in and convert themselves to the gods, receiving this power from the divinities together with twofold impressions according to essence. The one, that they may abide there, but the other, that having proceeded, they may convert themselves to their causes. Okay, so they receive from the gods. He's dividing into the Trinity, or the, abiding, processing, reverting. The division is the abiding by itself is one of the two impressions granted by the gods, or powers granted by the gods, the power to abide in being, and then also the power to proceed and convert together. And these things we may survey not only in souls, but also in inanimate natures. For what else ingenerates in these a sympathy with other powers, but the symbols which they are allotted by nature, some of which are allied to this, but others to that series of gods? Okay, so the powers of the gods, even if they don't directly create all mundane natures, the powers of the gods are what allows natural things to have sympathetic relations with each other. Peculiar qualities the natural things have derive from one or the other series of beings. And those serai or rays are each rooted in one of the henads. So peculiarities, naturalistic peculiarities, have their root in this initial differentiation of natures that occurs ultimately in the first hypostasis with the order of henads. For nature, being supernally suspended from the gods and distributed from their orders, inserts also in bodies impressions of their alliance to the divinities. In some, indeed, inserting solar, but in others lunar impressions, and in others again the symbol of some other god. And, of course, Iamblichus will use this in constructing his theurgic rites, where different mundane bodies have sympathetic resonances with different younger gods. Like gold, I would assume, would be like solar. An emerald might have an affinity with a aphrodisiac energy, or of the planet Venus, and so forth. And then according to the astrological chart of that time, or of the chart of the theurgic practitioner, you like use the right mundane objects with which sympathize correctly with the position of the heavenly bodies, and presumably modified such as to produce the particular kind of magical effect they're looking to get out of the rite. And these indeed convert themselves to the gods, some as to the gods simply, but others as to particular gods. Okay, so even natural things convert themselves to the gods, some to the gods generically, because I guess they're very mixed, but then others convert to particular gods, nature thus perfecting her progeny according to different peculiarities of the divinities. So I see. So the reversion of a soul is more literally a return to the gods in some sense, but the reversion of corporeal natures, like they can't turn all parts of themselves towards one transcendent level of being like souls can, which are capable of self-reversion in the true sense. Instead, the perfection of mundane natures is like their reversion. So the restoration of naturalistic processes is analogous to reversion of souls, or the reversion of other beings. The demiurge of the universe, therefore, by a much greater priority, impressed these symbols in souls. So, right. In an even greater degree than we bear the stamp of the various henads, by which they might be able to abide in themselves and again convert themselves to the sources of their being. Yeah, so the power of existence and reversion, as we've said multiple times now, is from the gods. And through the symbol of unity, indeed, he conferred on them stability, but through intellect he imparted to them the power of conversion. So, okay, it can be generalized here by the symbol of unity, the kind of henad of our own existence. He gives the abiding nature. And then through intellect, he imparts the power of conversion. Being, life, intellect. Intellect is that reverting phase. But we have abiding being related to the kind of henad of a thing, and then the conversion related to intellect. I think this is just an incomplete division here. There are more levels of this that he hasn't spelled out. But to this conversion, prayer is of the greatest utility, for it attracts to itself the beneficence of the gods through those ineffable symbols which the Father of souls has disseminated in them. It likewise unites those who pray with those to whom prayer is addressed, conjoins the intellect of the gods with the words of those who pray, excites the will of those who perfectly comprehend good to the abundant communication of it, is the fabricator of divine persuasion, and establishes in the gods all that we possess. In other words, it doesn't give the gods these things. The gods already contain us, but in our reversion, even though we're always in the gods, we still can bring everything we have closer to them. Presumably, I'm not sure what, and this is Iamblichus being summarized. I'm not sure, but I think Proclus will never really argue against Iamblichus. We'll see, though. But yeah, the fabricator of divine persuasion. What exactly do we mean by persuasion there? It's not clear. To a perfect and true prayer, however, there is required in the first place a knowledge of all the divine orders to which he who prays approaches. For no one will accede to the gods in a proper manner unless he has a knowledge of their peculiarities. Hence also the oracle admonishes that a fire-hearted conception has the first order in sacred worship. Fire-heated conception has the first order in sacred worship. Our conceptions, in other words, have to be clarified. But in the second place, there is required a confirmation of our life with that which is divine, and this accompanied with all purity, chastity, discipline, and order, through which our concerns being introduced to the gods, we shall attract their beneficence, and our souls will become subject to them. In the third place, contact is necessary, according to which we touch the divine essence with the summit of our soul, and verge to a union with it. But there is yet farther required an approximating adhesion, for thus the oracle calls it, when it says, "The mortal, approximating to fire, will possess a light from the gods." The mortal approximating to fire possess a light from the gods. I'm not totally tracking. Let's read the sentence again. There is yet farther required an approximating adhesion. For thus the oracle calls it when it says, "The mortal approximating to fire will possess a light from the gods." For this imparts to us a greater communion with and a more manifest participation in the light of the gods. Okay, so I think it's just saying that you need, so the adhesive is like the physical symbol that you as a physical being come into communion with in order to analogically come into union with the archetype of that physical symbol. In the last place, union succeeds establishing the one of the soul in the one of the gods, and causing our energy to become one with divine energy, according to which we are no longer ourselves, but are absorbed, as it were, in the gods, abiding in divine light and circularly comprehended by it. And this is the best end of true prayer. So this would be theosis. This is the best end of true prayer, in order that the conversion of the soul may be conjoined with its permanency, and that everything which proceeds from the one of the gods may again be established in the one, and the light which is in us may be comprehended in the light of the gods. Prayer, therefore, is no small part of the whole ascent of souls, nor is he who possesses virtue superior to the want of the good which proceeds from prayer. Okay, so someone who has a virtue is not superior to someone who has the desire for goodness that comes from a good prayer life, I guess. But on the contrary, the ascent of the soul is affected through it, that desire for the gods affected by prayer. And together with this, piety to the gods, which is the summit of virtue. So, love of the gods and piety to the gods is the summit of virtue and is superior to any mundane virtue. Nor in short, ought any other to pray than he who is transcendently good, as the Athenian guest in Plato says. For to such a one, converse with the gods becomes most efficacious to the attainment of a happy life. But the contrary is naturally adapted to befall the vicious, for it is not lawful for the pure to be touched by the impure. So that's interesting. Apparently there are dire consequences if you try to pray, but have wrong conceptions, presumably, or have not fulfilled any of those other levels of preparation, including purity, chastity, etc. So, okay. Hence, it is necessary that he who generously enters on the exercise of prayer should render the gods propitious to him, and should excite in himself conceptions full of intellectual light. For the favor and benignity of more exalted beings is the most effectual incentive to their communication with our natures. So making ourselves loved by the gods is the way to receive their communications. But then again, like this language, I've seen him elsewhere say that like divine beings disseminate their goodness to all things, and it's the recipient who lacks. So when he says the favor of the gods, maybe that would imply that gods can like be respecters of persons and say like, oh yeah, I like this, but not that, or that they can change because someone's aptness to receive divine rewards can change. That doesn't mean that the god's favor has changed. Instead, I think this can be interpreted according to a change in affection of the patient, not the agent, once again. But like for the purpose of just like ease of language, it makes sense to talk for the favor of the gods. And it is requisite to continue without intermission in the worship of divinity, prayer without ceasing. For according to the oracle, the rapid gods perfect the mortal constantly employed in prayer. I don't know who the rapid gods are, the intelligible gods. So they perfect the mortal constantly employed in prayer. It is also necessary to observe a stable order in the performance of divine works, to exert those virtues which purify and elevate the soul from generation, together with faith, truth, and love, to preserve this triad and hope of good, this immutable reception of divine light and segregation from every other pursuit, that thus becoming alone, we may associate with the solitary deity, and not endeavor to conjoin ourselves with multitude to the one. May your eye be single. For he who attempts this affects the very contrary and separates himself from the gods. Yep. So trying to pray to the gods or to the one, attempting theosis when you are manifold in your desires will actually, for some reason, separate you further. For As it is not lawful in conjunction with non-entity to associate with being, so neither is it possible with multitude to be conjoined with the one. Such therefore are the particulars which ought first to be known concerning prayer, viz., that the essence of it congregates and binds souls to the gods, or rather, that it unites all secondary to primary natures. For as the great Theodorus says, all things pray except the first. And Theodorus, was Theodorus the mathematician from the Theaetetus? Yeah. He was mentioned recently in the text. I was just reviewing it. The perfection, however, how much further do we have? Okay, the first quote is coming up, so we'll get to that quote. The perfection, however, of prayer, beginning from more common goods, beginning from more common goods, ends in divine union, and gradually accustoms the soul to divine light. But its efficacious energy both replenishes us with good and causes our concerns to be common with those of the gods. With respect to the causes of prayer, too, we may infer that so far as they are effective, they are the efficacious powers of the gods, converting and calling upwards the soul to the gods themselves. But that so far as they are final or perfective, they are the immaculate goods of the soul, which they derive as the fruits of being established in the gods. That so far also as they are paradigmatical, they are the primordial causes of beings, which proceed from the good and are united to it according to one ineffable union. The causes of prayer is the class of being that we're talking about. But that so far as they are formal, they assimilate souls to the gods and give perfection to the whole of their life. And that so far as they are material, so yeah, the causes of prayer, he's dividing into the 6 classes, or he's not going to mention instrumental. Proclus hasn't. That's an innovation after Proclus, I guess, separating that out. But that's a con cause anyway, not a true cause. All right, and that so far as they are material, they are impressions or symbols inserted by the demiurge in the essences of souls, in order that they may be excited to a reminiscence of the gods who produce them, and whatever else exists. So, insofar as the cause is material, they are meant to excite a reminiscence of the gods. So they're like clues left in matter. So that's like a potency. Matter being kind of pure potential. So the potential to be incited to prayer is like an opportunity to be reminded of the gods. Moreover, we may likewise define the modes of prayer, which are various according to the genre and species of the gods. For prayer is either demiurgic, or cathartic, or vivific. Okay, interesting. So 3 types of prayer: demiurgic, cathartic, or vivific. Cathartic seems straightforward, but let's see. And the demiurgic is such as that which is offered for the sake of showers and winds. So kind of collaborating in the production of the world, trying to shape the direction of nature or participate in its like good shaping. For the demiurgy are the causes of the generation of these, and the prayers of the Athenians for winds procuring serenity of weather are addressed to these gods. Okay. But the cathartic prayer is that which is offered for the purpose of averting diseases originating from pestilence and other contagious distempers. Cathartic, like purificatory, right? So getting rid of sickness would be a cathartic prayer, such as we have written in our temples. And the vivific prayer is that with which we worship the gods who are the causes of vivification, on account of the origin and maturity of fruits. Okay. let's see, in the Jitsi, Brian reminds me with a quip that all prayer can be reduced to help, sorry, or thanks. Yeah, so demiurgic, contributing to the building, help building, or sorry, as in purify what is sinful or sickly, and then thanks is this the way in which we worship the gods. Okay. Hence, prayers are of a perfective nature because they elevate us to these orders of the gods. And he who considers such prayers in a different manner fails in properly apprehending the nature and efficacy of prayer. But again, with reference to the things for which we pray, those prayers which regard the salvation of the soul obtain the first place, and those which pertain to the good temperament of the body, the second, and those rank in the third place, which are offered for the sake of external concerns. Kind of mirrors the different orders that we should care about from the Alcibiades. And lastly, with respect to the division of the times in which we offer up prayers, it is either according to the seasons of the year or the centers of the solar revolution, or we establish multiform prayers according to other such-like conceptions. Okay, so that's Proclus's general remarks on prayer in preparation for Timaeus's actual commencement, and he will begin with an invocation of divinity, and we'll start with that. Timaeus's speech begins, and I'm sure it'll be pretty interesting from here on out. So cool, we'll pick this up hopefully during the week if there's time. Otherwise, next Saturday at 10. We might just start the Iamblichian curriculum over while we continue doing these, because this is just so different from that, and this doesn't require a lot of outside prep. We're going through the text now, so that seems like it's probably good enough, which means hypothetically there's time to be investing in reading and prep, since we're all familiar with that. I don't know if both of you in the Jitsi would want to join, or how many people would want to redo the Iamblichian curriculum, but I think we could do it a lot better this time. So I'll consider starting that in the not too distant future. But okay, that's it for today. Thanks everybody. Take care.